Father Rodriguez, you encourage people to attend the traditional Latin Mass. Someone asked the question, but how can families fulfill their Sunday obligation if there is no Latin Mass anywhere near them? What do you recommend?
Okay, again, I strongly urge you to be willing to make extra sacrifices. Not some years back, this was, I forget how many years, but it was quite a ways back. This was, well, I guess it doesn't really matter that much. But the point was that the traditional Latin Mass wasn't that available. It was definitely less available than it is now. Obviously, in the last couple of years, it's become less available than maybe 3 or 4 years ago, because in the last couple of years, a lot of the Latin masses have been shut down. But regardless, the point is that there weren't that many possibilities to go to the Latin Mass. So I remember talking with a gentleman, and he was telling me that he and his family had pretty much been going to the traditional Latin Mass every single Sunday for years, and that they had to travel, I believe it was about 5 hours. So they had to drive about 5 hours, and he had a family of I think about 7 children. And so he said, look, he said, we would leave every Sunday, and I think kind of like at 4 a.m, because it would take them, let's say, 5 hours, 9, and I think the Mass that they were going to was at 10. So they would leave at 4 o'clock. The Mass was at 10. After Mass, he said, the children would take them, they go and eat and take them to a park and kind of let the children have time to play. And then, start heading home at, I don't know, let's say maybe 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and getting home, let's say at 7 or 8 p.m. So for them, it was like a whole day thing. Before the sunrise to, let's say, the sunset. And I was just taken aback, because I couldn't believe, what he was telling me, because he was saying, we do this every single Sunday. And they've been doing it for, years. Obviously, in our history also, when I say in our history, in our Catholic history, there's so many examples of, Catholics who, in maybe, let's say, poorer countries, but also in previous times, that because they didn't have, vehicles, it would take them 2, 3, 4, 5 hours to walk to Mass on Sunday. Even if it was maybe, 4, 5, 6, 10 miles, but again, it was the whole day of Sunday that they would, go to Mass. So I just mentioned this because I think that we're living in certainly desperate times, unparalleled times. And so I would say, well, it requires also some great heroism on the part of many of the faithful. And so that's one thing that I always emphasize when the faithful say, well, I don't really have access to the traditional Latin Mass. I'd say, well, how close is or how far is, let's say, the closest traditional Latin Mass that you can get to? And I would say definitely consider trying to get to it, even if it means making a heroic sacrifice. Now, again, you're not required to do that. If it's really pretty much, if it's further away than an hour, you're not, let's say, not fulfilling your Sunday obligation if you don't go, because it is considered, let's say, an undue burden to have to travel that far. But I do encourage you to really make the effort to try and go, even if it does require an extra effort. But that's the other thing too, though, is that it is, I think, important to recognize that ultimately the ones who have the responsibility to provide for the Latin Mass are the bishops and the priests. It also goes back to how much we need to pray for our bishops and priests. Certainly, if you're in a situation where you don't have easy access to the Latin Mass, make more of an effort to pray for the conversion of your priests and bishops so that a Latin Mass will be provided, hopefully sometime soon. And then the other thing that I would say is really, again, make an effort to do your very best to make a good spiritual communion and to observe a time of uniting yourself spiritually to the holy sacrifice of the Mass on that Sunday. I mean, I would say dedicate at least an hour, going over all the prayers of the Mass, praying the Holy Rosary. But again, this is my recommendation. It doesn't mean that this is, like, let's say, the gospel truth. I just think that it's so critical that we recover the traditional Latin Mass and that we have as many Catholics as possible that really make that commitment, that I'd say, look, the responsibility to provide that falls on the bishops and the priests, and you do your very best within, your capabilities to, adhere to the traditional Latin Mass.